The firstborn said to the younger, "Our father is aging, and there is not a man on earth available to be intimate with us in the customary way, so that we may have children. Come, let us make our father drunk with wine, and we will lie with him, so that we may preserve our family through our father."
What? Ugh.
Welcome back to the Black Bible.
The Black Bible.
The Black Bible.
The Black Bible.
Message and rhythm.
Moments in the Bible that make us go, what?
God can take an unfavorable situation and turn
They
it.
don't have that type of insight to say, and I'm going to say maturity.
Like I said, I will try my best to stall, but it's going to be like, people who know me, it's going to be written all over my face. Yeah.
Church is made of imperfect people trying to serve a perfect God. Welcome back to the Black Bible, and welcome to the introductory segment of Moments in the Bible that make us go, what? We're coming from Genesis 19, and we're talking about Lot's children. More specifically, Lot's daughters.
So let's paint the picture. This is after the events of Sodom and Gomorrah, where Lot and his family fled because the Lord was going to destroy the city. And of course, this is after Lot has lost his wife and his daughters has lost their mother. So Lot fled to the small town of Zoar, but because Lot was fearful in that town, he ended up taking his daughters and fleeing, if you could call it that, into the mountains and into a cave. It's here that his daughters come up with the plan, since in their eyes there was no other man that would, you know, sleep with them and extend their family line. They come up with the plan to sleep with Lot in order to continue the bloodline.
But not only do they plan to sleep with him, they drug Lot and then sleep with him.
More specifically, make him drunk, which in any case is still not okay. That doesn't make the situation better at all.
And so, of course, they both have children, and one of them, the oldest one, is called Moab, and the second one is called Ben-Ami. And if you know the history, Moab becomes the Moabites, and then Ben-Ami actually becomes the Ammonites, which are very much enemies of Israel. Which brings us back to what? Why? Why would they even think of this plan that I'm going to sleep with? First of all, they thought, let's sleep with our dad to have kids. Because there's no, what? That's nasty.
But I think the if I could say, interesting thing about this story most definitely would have to be the mindset of the daughters, because as I was kind of looking over the different translations, and the one I settled was on the Amplified version, which in my opinion helps paint it very clear of what they were thinking, at least the older daughter was thinking, and that she said, there is not a man on earth available to be intimate with us in the customary way. So in her mind, there was no longer any men who, and this is my assumption, that the customary way is through marriage, or what marriage was in that time. So the older daughter says that, yeah, there's no longer any men around who we can have children through the customary way, and so the only other way is through our father. Which in my mind, it was kind of was out of desperation.
And I get being out of desperation, but this is where I feel like they should have said something to Lot. If their thing was, oh, we want kids, then they should have said, hey, Dad, I want to be a mom, and express to him that there are no men in the area. And probably Lot would say, we should continue the bloodline. Here, let's go here, let's go there. Instead of saying, hey sis, let's get our father drunk, sleep with him, and have kids. That still makes no sense to me.
And it doesn't. It really doesn't make any sense. But I guess again, I don't agree with this at all, because I myself think this is very disgusting. But looking at it from the sense of that, okay, Lot is aging, maybe he can't travel like he used to, and maybe his daughters didn't want to, even if Lot was okay with sending them away to get husbands, maybe the daughters didn't really want to leave Lot, to by himself. I guess they want to stay with their father until Lot passes away, whether it be to natural causes, most likely to natural causes. But that's just my assumption. But I do agree is that they could have at least told Lot, hey pops, we want to have kids, keep the bloodline going. And I'm pretty sure Lot would have been like, yeah, I don't want my line to end here. So you know what, let's see if we could figure something out. Let's see if we could, find some way to either help me go along with you guys, or you guys could go find husbands and have children instead of, because I really think that Lot was not down for sleeping with his daughters, and the daughters knew that. That's why they got him drunk.
For sure, that's why they got him drunk. But I also think another reason why they thought about this is because they were coming from Sodom and Gomorrah. Mm-hmm. And remember, Sodom and Gomorrah is totally immoral. They're like, anything that moved, those people were going to sleep with it.
That's true.
And so they grew up in Sodom and Gomorrah. They fled a home where that's the mindset. So here they are in this cave, the sister, the younger sister and their dad, and they're like, well, that's unfortunate, but we need to have kids. We need to preserve the line, and dad's the only one here, so
here's a question though, right? Because I think not only could we kind of sort of tie it into, how the world is today, even though we're not really going to go too deeply into that. We're mainly focus on the text. But the interesting thing I found is kind of like, yes, you see, in my honest opinion, you see moments of desperation, but also you kind of see moments of, if I could say it loosely, like follow the leader.
Yeah.
Essentially is that we never really, in all the translations I've read, I've never really seen input from the younger daughter. It was always the older daughter said, okay, let's sleep with our dad, I'll go first. And after the older daughter sleeps with Lot, then she's like, okay, I slept with dad, now it's your turn. Okay, let's get him drunk again. And it's not saying that, the younger daughter forced the younger daughter to do this. At least if that was the case, it's not outlined in the text. But what is outlined from what's seen on the page is that, yeah, like the older daughter said, let's do this, and the younger daughter was like, okay. It seems like she was okay with it, just went along with it.
And it could also be kind of like, remember, the mom is gone, so now the oldest daughter has matriarchal power now,
right?
Because now she is the eldest woman in their quote unquote clan, if I could call it that way. So maybe she was just like, my sister, because remember, they said they lived, he never said he never said how long he lived in Zorar. So he could have lived in Zorar for a long time, and Zorar, that he settled there, and Zorar got horrible, and he was afraid that maybe what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah will also happen to Zorar.
Right.
So before that could happen, he picks up his family and flees to the hills. So maybe the sister, basically elder sister, helped raise the younger sister. But it just goes to show you, that she could have said no.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of times that we follow people, they have ideas, and we're like, sure, whatever. But she could have said, nah, that's not the move. I'm not finna do that. But she just was like, just went along with it. So it could be because of matriarchal power, but really and truly, she should have said no.
Right.
I would have said no. My sister ever came to me in that type of sense, I was like, are you crazy? Have you lost your mind? That is our dad. That is nasty, sis. Nasty.
But again, you also have to look at it like what you said earlier, is that coming out of Sodom and Gomorrah, that how they had that mindset ingrained in them. Where it's like, again, like you said, anything that moves as sexual immorality in that city was pretty much off the charts. On top of course, off top of other sins, but one of the main sins that was outlined, if I'm quoting the Bible correctly, was sexual immorality. And so sexual immorality is a very wide scope that I will not go into. But coming from that background, maybe the younger sister could have been more hesitant, but again, because of that background, being raised kind of sort of in that place, or growing up in that in that culture, I should say, growing up in that culture, she probably was hesitant, but at the end of the day was probably like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, we've seen this plenty of times, we've heard about it plenty of times. Where we're coming from, what's the difference from where we're coming from to here?
And it's kind of having that you could take the if I quote the Jungle Book, you could take the man out of the jungle, but you can't take the jungle out of the man type instance, because then they still have that type of mentality. And that's why I feel like people who are coming from such a like place in that, and they want to change, they have to change. They can't just change only their environment, but they have to change their mindset as well.
Right.
Like everything starts and finishes with the mind. Like you can move if you have friends that drink and you decide you don't want to drink anymore, you can move away from them, sure. You can stop cutting them off, sure. But if you still have that mindset of, oh, every time I go to a party I have to drink, every time I have a meal I have to drink, every time this I have to drink, then your mindset hasn't changed. Like you just changed locations, you haven't changed your mind. So you still are going to do the same things. You still are going to drink, you still are going to do what you were doing with your friends, because your minds haven't changed.
I think I was further along in the, not in the Old Testament. The Old Testament I've covered it, but I know in the New Testament the Bible definitely talks about the renewal of your mind, because again it's that understanding of that change. Yes, change can happen out in the outwards, but if you don't change how you think, then it doesn't matter how you change in the outwards, then you're still going to keep repeating the same cycle over and over and over again.
And that's the problem. I think that's one of the main problems with, because we'll read later, we'll talk about Israel and all this other stuff. The main problem with Israel was, again, they took the people out of Egypt, but they never took Egypt out of the people. They were still very much polytheistic, and they were still very much, having problems with worshiping only God. So that's why, they had all these issues within the biblical text, because their mindset towards God being the only God hadn't changed.
Right.
And so with these women now, it's not only their mindsets hadn't changed, but they're also desperate. Because again, if you ever read, we'll read and talk about it, that having children was an important part of their culture. Like you were frowned upon if you were a woman who didn't have kids. If you're a woman that was barren, who wasn't able to have kids, you were basically a social pariah. Like you had to have children. And so at this point, they're like, one, there's no other men, which is a total lie. That's just a lie within a lie within a lie. And two, their mindset is not only Sodom and Gomorrah, but also desperate. We need to have kids and their excuse is to preserve the line, which in truth and in fact, it's not really an excuse, because there's no male. They never said that Lot. The Bible never covers that Lot had a male child, so a male child would preserve the line, but women at that point could not, and that's just a biblical thing. So, they wanted to preserve the line, so they're super desperate, and people will do crazy things out of desperation.
So so I have a question, right?
Yeah.
In that, again, we see in both times, and I guess my question isn't readily answered, because it says, and after Lot got drunk the first time and he got up the next morning, he didn't remember anything. But my question is, do you think in this specific scenario with Lot, like he should be held accountable, or there should be any accountability for the actions of the daughter? Because again, if you look at it, it was like, okay, he got drunk, so we assume that he got blackout drunk, can't remember anything that happened, not only once but twice, kind of sort of back to back within a day. There was no time span in between. It was like, okay, the oldest one slept with him, and now the youngest one slept with him the following day. So do you think in this case Lot has any form of accountability for what happened?
I think, okay, twofold, yes and no. Yes, because if we go back historically in that family, Lot made the decision, because first if we go back, Lot wasn't in Sodom and Gomorrah. He camped outside of Sodom and Gomorrah. Right. So he had control over like how his daughters interacted with the city. But then when God says, I'm going to destroy the city, Lot is in the thick of it.
Right.
Like literally like the backyardigans into the thick of it. He is in the thick of Sodom and Gomorrah. So like he didn't have to settle there. He could have settled somewhere else. So that mindset that they had is sort of Lot's fault. But then with the whole getting blacked out drunk and getting basically raped by your daughters, I can't say that that's Lot's fault. Right. Because then he's not thinking that if he gets blackout drunk that his daughters are going to take advantage of him. Right. Now, here's my thing. When they had the kids, why didn't he ask no questions? Like, was there any questions being asked? Like, whose child is this? Who's the baby daddy? Like, like what are these? Were there no questions? I mean, the Bible never says that there is any questions that comes up, but we know that that's Lot's kids. Does he know that it's his kids? That's the next question.
I think he probably knew, because again, I could be wrong, but I think Genesis 19 is the last we hear of Lot directly.
Yeah.
Of course, later on in the Bible through the Moabites and the Ammonites that, we know from this reading this, we know like, okay, technically those are the descendants of Lot.
You're right.
But this is the last time we hear of Lot directly, and again, I could be wrong, but the Bible never really covers what happened 9 months later.
You're right.
But I think, especially if, his daughters were really, I won't say joined at the hip, but if they never really ventured out off the mountain, like they probably, and it never says, it never went into how they got water and how they got food, but we're assuming that they found some sort of sustainability, whether on the mountain or in the surrounding towns. But if we're assuming that there was really no surrounding towns, just wilderness, and then the mountain, then I believe that he knew that 9 months later, even before 9 months later, when he started to see the belly bump on both of his daughters almost at the exact same time, then I think he probably knew that, wow. ... But again, the Bible never really goes into like, okay, Lot's reaction, what was said. We just know that from the daughters' choices comes the Moabites. Yeah, comes the Moabites and the Ammonites. And this is actually a great segue into, consequences, actions and consequences from that. I mean, if you really think about it, just from the actions of two people, like, affected the whole tribe of Israel for years. Where like they had, when they became neighbors to the Moabites and the Ammonites, like if you read in Judges and even a bit before Judges, it was like fighting, and at some points they were oppressed by them, like, and this all stemmed from the actions of just two people.
And that just goes to show you how what we do and what you do affects your community. Because really and truly, Israel was related to the Moabites and Israel was related to the Ammonites. And so what we do and how our actions affects not only us, but affects the whole community. But on the brighter end, like when you read later down in the Bible, the Moabites, Ruth, who is a very important character in the Bible because she gets her own book at this point. Ruth, now, who's the mother of Jesse, who's the mother of Jesse, who is the father of David, who is like the great grand something of Jesus. So that's a bright side out of it. But again, that whole we affect our community happens because of these two young women.
And I think, going back to the point that you make, the brighter side, I think that just goes to show just one of the ways that God could take kind of any situation. Because let's be honest, like, looking at this now, this is a very morally corrupt, if I think that's the right term, a very morally wrong.
It was just nasty.
It was just a
downright
nasty.
disgusting.
It was nasty. It was dirty. This is a very wrong and a very messed up situation.
Right.
But it just goes to show you how God can take a situation that seems wrong or maybe messed up or even unfavorable and kind of turn it around, not only for for his glory, but also turn it around for you. Right. Because again, not only through the Moabites came Christ, and from Christ we know that, we the Gentiles had a chance to come to God, and so on the day of judgment we have a chance to be saved. Mm-hmm. So in a way, it's not only God can take an unfavorable situation and turn it favorably, but it's also an interesting way to see that this is all according to God's plan, like how He used this in order to bring about the Moabites, in order to bring about Ruth.
Right.
And from Ruth came Jesse, like you said, and from Jesse came David, and from David's line came Jesus, the ultimate Redeemer. So it just goes to show you that everything that happens, I won't say in a way, but anything that happens fits into God's plan. But does that mean that the situation was, and looking back on it today, does that mean that the situation with Lot and his daughters was okay? Far from
okay. And I think it also doesn't mean that we should do things that are immorally and then expect God to turn it around.
Right.
Like, that's not the whole point. It's that, God can take something that happened to you, that happened to somebody that is just unjust and immoral and just downright wrong, and He could bring about something wonderful from it. Actually, from Ruth's line comes numbers of kings, David, Solomon, all these powerful kings come from a woman from Moab, which came from a messed up situation.
Very messed up situation.
So God can take things that were messed up and turn it around and make it beautiful, but it doesn't mean we should put ourselves in positions and expect God to make what we did into a beautiful catastrophe.
Exactly.
So, but this whole thing with Lot and his daughters still makes my stomach churn.
Very much so.
Very much so. So thank you guys for listening to Moments in the Bible that make us go, what? And we'll see you next time on the Black Bible.